Commander Al stepped off the transport shuttle and felt the dry wind of IV against his scaled skin. The border world was nothing special to look at. Brown dirt, rocks, and a sky that seemed too pale for his liking. But this was where the High Command had sent him, so this was where he would fight. He had been told that humans would be his allies in this mission. The thought did not comfort him. They had heard stories about humans, of course, a young species from a harsh world, aggressive, emotional, unpredictable. They had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago, and already they were everywhere. Like insects, some officers joked, impossible to get rid of once they settled somewhere. Al walked toward the forward operating base with his second-in-command, sub-commander, at his side, was younger and even more skeptical of their new allies than Al himself. "I have read reports about human military tactics," said quietly. "They are inefficient. They take unnecessary risks. They waste resources on objectives that have no strategic value." "We will work with what we have," Al replied. "Our orders are clear. Defend the evacuation until the transport ships arrive." The base was a collection of temporary structures and defensive walls built in haste. Engineers had done most of the work, but Al noticed humans moving among them. They were smaller than he expected, soft skin in various shades of brown and pink. No scales, no armor plating, no natural weapons of any kind. How this species had survived on there was a mystery to him. A human female approached them. She wore combat armor and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen many battles. Her hair was cut short and practical, and her eyes were calm despite the chaos around her. "Commander Al," she asked, "I'm Captain Lisa Grant. I'll be commanding the human forces during this operation." Al studied her for a moment. She was polite but not submissive, direct but not aggressive. He found this acceptable. "Captain Grant," he said, "I have reviewed the situation reports. 40,000 civilians require evacuation. The transport ships will arrive in 18 hours. The horde has been detected moving toward this position in significant numbers." 5-to-1 odds against us, Grant said. "Maybe worse." "You seem calm about this." Grant smiled slightly. "Calm is better than panic. Come on, I'll show you our positions." They walked through the base together, and Al observed everything. Human soldiers were preparing for battle in ways he did not understand. They checked their weapons, yes, but they also checked on each other. One soldier was sharing food with another. A group was laughing at something, actually laughing, as if they were not about to face overwhelming enemy forces. "Your soldiers seem relaxed," Al said. "They're scared," Grant replied. "They just don't let it control them. Humor helps." Al did not understand this. Fear was a signal to be cautious. Joy was for times of safety. Mixing them together seemed like madness. They reached the command center, where maps and tactical displays covered every surface. Grant introduced him to her key officers. Sergeant Danny Cole was a large man with a thick beard and hands that looked like they could crush stone. Lieutenant was the combat medic, a small woman with gentle eyes that turned hard when she spoke about the enemy. There were others too, all of them human, all of them looking at Al with curiosity rather than hostility. "Here's the situation," Grant said, pointing at the map. "Civilians are spread across 12 settlement zones. The main spaceport is here. When the transports arrive, everyone needs to be at the spaceport or they don't make it off this rock." Al studied the map carefully. The tactical picture was not good. The settlements were spread too far apart. The defensive lines were too thin, and they would attack from multiple directions at once. "I recommend we withdraw to the inner perimeter immediately," Al said. "Abandon the outer settlements and concentrate our forces around the spaceport. This will increase our chances of survival by 37%. The room went quiet. The human officers looked at each other, then at Captain Grant. "No," Grant said simply. Al blinked. "Captain, the mathematics are clear. If we spread our forces across all positions, we will suffer catastrophic losses. The outer settlements cannot be held. There are still people in those outer settlements, Grant said. Families, children, old folks who can't move fast. If we pull back now, we leave them to die. Some losses are acceptable to preserve the greater force. Grant's eyes met his, and for a moment, Al saw something in them that he could not name. It was not anger. It was not defiance. It was something deeper and harder. Not to us, she said. We hold every position until every civilian is clear. That's not negotiable. Sergeant Cole stepped forward. Commander, I understand your math, and maybe you're right that more of us will die this way. But here's the thing. Those people out there, they're counting on us. They went asleep last night believing that someone would protect them. We don't get to decide their lives aren't worth the risk. Al looked around the room. Every human face showed the same expression. They agreed with their captain. They would stay and fight for strangers, for people they had never met, even if it meant their own deaths. It was illogical. It was wasteful. It went against every principle of efficient warfare that they had developed over 10,000 years. And yet none of them wavered. Very well, Al said finally. We will hold all positions, but I want it noted in my report that this decision was made against my tactical recommendation. Note whatever you want, Grant said. Just help us keep these people alive. That night Al stood on the outer wall and watched the horizon. Joined him, his scales reflecting the pale moonlight. The humans are fools, said quietly. They will get us all killed. Perhaps, Al said, but I am beginning to think there is something we do not understand about them, something our intelligence reports failed to capture. What could that be? Al did not answer. He was watching the human soldiers below, moving among the defensive positions. They were still checking on each other, still sharing jokes and food and moments of connection. They were going to face death in the morning, and yet they acted as if every small kindness mattered. His communicator beeped. Scout reports were coming in. Advance units had been detected less than 20 kilometers away. The battle would begin at dawn. The first wave came with the sunrise. They poured over the eastern hills like a dark flood, thousands of armored bodies moving with terrible purpose. They were built for war. 6 limbs, natural armor plating, and jaws that could tear through metal. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply consumed everything in their path. Al commanded the left flank alongside a mixed unit of and human soldiers. He had positioned his best marksmen on the elevated ridges and placed heavy weapons at the. It was textbook defensive doctrine. They had perfected these tactics over centuries of warfare. Here they come, Sergeant Cole said through the communication channel. His voice was steady, almost casual. All units hold fire until they reach the marked line. Al watched the approach. They moved fast, faster than any species their size should be able to move. Behind him, he heard human soldiers breathing, shifting their weight, preparing for the impact. Now, Cole said. The defensive line erupted with weapons fire. Energy beams and projectile rounds tore into the advance. Dozens fell in the first volley, but dozens more kept coming, and behind them hundreds more. Al fired his rifle in controlled bursts, targeting the larger that seemed to be directing the others. One fell, then another, but for every one he killed, 2 more appeared. The battle was chaos, noise and dust and the screams of the wounded from both sides. Al had been in many battles before, but something about this one felt different. They were not just attacking. They were testing, probing, looking for weaknesses. A report came through his communicator. The southern ridge, held by a unit, was taking heavy fire. Casualties were mounting. The unit commander was requesting permission to fall back to the secondary line. Standard doctrine: fall back when losses exceed sustainable levels. Preserve fighting strength for future engagements. Permission granted, Al replied. Withdraw to secondary positions. He watched as the unit began their retreat, moving in disciplined formations down the ridge. They saw the movement and surged forward, sensing weakness. They would catch the retreating soldiers in the open ground. Then something unexpected happened. A squad of human soldiers, without any orders from command, broke from their position and moved to cover the retreat. They placed themselves directly in the path of the advancing and opened fire. "What are they doing?" demanded over the communication channel. "They were not ordered to move. They are exposing themselves." Al watched in disbelief. The humans were taking fire that had been meant for his retreating soldiers. They stood in the open, shooting and moving, drawing attention away from the vulnerable. 3 humans fell in the first minute, then 2 more, but they did not retreat. They held their ground until the last soldier reached the secondary line. "Cole," Al called through his communicator, "your soldiers just sacrificed their position to cover my unit." "Yeah," Cole replied. There was the sound of weapons fire in the background. "That's what we do." The first wave broke against the defensive line like water against rock. They retreated to regroup, leaving hundreds of their dead behind. But the cost had been significant. Al received casualty reports from across the front. Too many. Far too many. He found Lieutenant in the medical station, moving between wounded soldiers with calm efficiency. Her hands were covered in blood, both red human blood and the blue blood of. She did not seem to notice the difference. "Lieutenant," Al said, "I saw you during the battle. You ran into active fire to retrieve a wounded soldier." Looked up from her work. Her eyes were tired but alert. "Private L. He took a hit to the leg, couldn't move on his own." "You risked your life for one of my soldiers." "He's one of our soldiers now," said simply. "We're all in this together, Commander." She returned to her work, and Al stood there for a long moment trying to understand. In military doctrine, a medic's primary duty was to preserve the most valuable assets. Officers first, then specialists, then common soldiers. The wounded who could not be saved quickly were left for later or not at all. Humans apparently did not operate this way. He found Captain Grant at the command post, reviewing tactical data and coordinating the next defensive positions. She looked exhausted but focused. "Your soldiers died covering my unit's retreat," Al said. "I did not order this." "No," Grant agreed. "They made that choice themselves." "Why would they die for soldiers who are not even their own species?" Grant put down her and looked at him directly. "Because they're not strangers anymore. They're ours now. The moment we started fighting together, we became responsible for each other." "This is not efficient." "No, but it's who we are." A young human soldier approached them. Al recognized him from the squad that had covered the retreat. His arm was bandaged, and he walked with a limp. He could not have been more than 20 years old by human standards. "Commander," the soldier said to Al, "that unit that was pulling back from the ridge, did they make it?" Al studied the young human. He had been shot protecting soldiers he had never met. He had lost friends in the action, and his first concern was whether the people he had saved were alive. "Yes," Al said. "They reached the secondary line, all of them." The soldier smiled. It was a small smile, tired and pained but genuine. "Good, that's good." He nodded and limped away to rejoin his unit. Appeared at Al's side. "Commander, I have received updated intelligence reports. The main force is approaching. It is 3 times larger than our initial estimates." 3 times, Al repeated. The numbers were devastating. Even with perfect tactics and maximum efficiency, they could not hold against such a force. "Command has authorized a full retreat," continued. "We can evacuate our forces and leave the humans to delay the enemy. It is the logical choice." Al turned to look at Captain Grant. She was already reading the same intelligence report. She looked up and met his eyes. "Well, Commander," she said, "looks like the odds just got worse. I'm keeping my people here. What about yours?" He thought about the young soldier who had smiled when he learned they had survived. He thought about Lieutenant running through fire to save one wounded alien. He thought about the squad that had died so that his soldiers could retreat safely. "We stay," Al said. The words surprised him even as he spoke them. Grant nodded. There was respect in her eyes now. "Then let's figure out how to survive the night." Night fell on IV and the darkness brought no rest. They did not sleep. They did not need to. Their physiology allowed them to fight continuously for days without pause. The defenders had no such advantage. Al walked the defensive lines, checking positions and speaking with soldiers. 12 hours remained until the evacuation transports would arrive. The perimeter had been pushed back to the secondary line. Ammunition was running low. Reinforcements were not coming. He found Captain Grant alone in a small room off the main command center. She was sitting at a table covered with reports. Each report was a name, a soldier who had died that day. "You memorized them," Al said. It was not a question. Grant looked up. Her face showed the weight of command, the burden of sending people to their deaths. "Everyone, it's the least I can do." Officers do not do this. We acknowledge losses as numbers, strategic assets expended in pursuit of objectives. That sounds easier. It is. That is the point. Emotional attachment to individual soldiers impairs command judgment. Grant smiled without humor. "And yet here you are, still fighting beside us. Your judgment seems intact." Al sat across from her. Outside, he could hear the distant sounds of movement. They were massing for another assault. "I have a question," he said. "Your military philosophy confuses me. You spend resources protecting wounded soldiers who may never fight again. You risk many to save few. You refuse to retreat even when retreat would preserve more lives. Why?" Grant was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "I had a brother. His name was. He was a soldier too, in one of the first human conflicts after we joined the galactic community. His unit was ambushed. Heavy casualties. The commander ordered a retreat to save the remaining forces. Standard tactical doctrine. Was wounded, couldn't walk. The unit left him behind." Al understood now. He died. He lived for 2 more hours before the enemy found him, alone, knowing that his own people had abandoned him. Grant's eyes were hard. "I joined the military the week after we buried him. I swore that no soldier under my command would ever die alone. No one gets left behind. Ever. This is personal for you." "Yes, but it's also bigger than me. Every human soldier knows the promise. If you fall, we come for you. If you're wounded, we carry you. If you die, we bring you home. That promise is what makes us willing to fight impossible odds, because we know deep in our bones that our people will never abandon us." A distant explosion shook the building. They were probing the northern defenses. "Your doctrine is inefficient," Al said. "More soldiers die because of it." "Probably true. And yet you continue." "We'd rather die together than survive by abandoning each other. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but it's who we are." The communication channel crackled with urgent reports. Forces were attacking the medical station. Night assault, fast and brutal. Grant was on her feet instantly. "Cole, status report." Sergeant Cole's voice came through with weapons fire in the background. "They hit us hard, Captain. Came through the east wall. We're holding but barely. Wounded can't be moved." "I'm sending reinforcements." "Negative. You need everyone on the main line. We'll handle this." Al made a decision that surprised even himself. "I will lead a counterattack. Volunteers only." Grant looked at him with something like respect. "Commander, you don't have to do this. Your soldiers died for mine this morning. This is balance." He moved through the base, calling for volunteers over the communication channel. Human and soldiers responded. They gathered at the rally point, checking weapons and preparing for close combat. appeared at his side. "Commander, this is unnecessary risk. The medical station is not strategically vital." "There are wounded soldiers inside," Al said, "and human, we do not leave them." Stared at him. "You sound like them now." "Perhaps I am beginning to understand them." The counterattack was brutal and close. They moved through dark corridors lit by weapons fire and burning wreckage, were everywhere, savage and relentless. Al fought beside human soldiers, his rifle blazing in the darkness. He saw things he would never forget. A human private throwing herself on it to give her squad time to reload. A medic dragging two wounded humans to safety while bleeding from his own wounds. Sergeant Cole, a giant among the chaos, holding a doorway with nothing but his sidearm and his bare hands. They reached the medical station and formed a defensive ring around the wounded. They came in waves, and they died in waves. The floor was slick with blood of 3 different colors. And then suddenly it was over. The remaining retreated. The medical station was secure. Cole was badly wounded. A blade had opened his side. Lieutenant worked on him with desperate efficiency while he gripped her arm and spoke through clenched teeth. "Did we hold?" "We held," Al told him. Cole smiled. It was the same smile as the young soldier from before, the smile of someone who valued others above himself. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was approaching. 8 hours remained until evacuation. Al found at the perimeter wall, staring at the massing forces. "Commander," said quietly, "High Command has sent updated orders. We are authorized to withdraw our forces while the humans hold the line. It would preserve 73% of our remaining soldiers." "And the humans?" "They would be overrun within hours, but that is not our concern. They made their choice." Al looked at the army. Then he looked at the human and soldiers standing together on the walls, exhausted but unbroken. "We stay," he said. "Commander, this violates direct orders from High Command." "Then I will answer for it, but I will not abandon soldiers who fought and died for us. They stayed for us. We stay for them." Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer. "I think I am beginning to understand them too," he said. The sun rose over IV, and the defenders stood together. The largest assault came with the morning light. They attacked from 3 directions at once, thousands upon thousands of armored bodies crashing against the defensive lines. The sound was like nothing Al had ever heard, a roar of violence that shook the ground and filled the air with dust and death. The western wall collapsed first, poured through the breach like water through a broken dam. Units fell back according to doctrine, retreating to the secondary positions. But there were humans in the gap. Al watched from the command post as a squad of 12 human soldiers moved to plug the breach. They had no chance. Everyone knew it. They knew it. But they went anyway. Private Amy Torres was among them. Al had seen her earlier that morning, sharing breakfast with a group of soldiers. She had been laughing at something, her young face full of life. Now she stood in a doorway with her rifle and refused to move. They came at her in waves. She shot them down, one after another. When her rifle ran dry, she drew her sidearm. When that was empty, she used her combat knife. 4 minutes she held that doorway. 4 minutes that allowed the defenders to reorganize and seal the breach. When reinforcements finally reached her, she was still alive. Barely. 17 wounds covered her body. She should have been dead 3 times over. "Why?" Al asked when he visited her in the medical station. "You could have retreated. No one would have blamed you." Torres looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "There were people behind me. If I ran, they died. Simple math, Commander." "That is not math. That is sacrifice." "Same thing where I come from." The battle raged on. The perimeter shrank. Every hour brought more casualties and less ground, but still the defenders held. Captain Grant was wounded during an incursion into the command post. A blade had caught her shoulder, cutting deep. Lieutenant wanted to evacuate her to the medical ship waiting in orbit. No, Grant said. Her voice was steady despite the pain. I stay with my soldiers. Captain, you've lost significant blood. You need surgery. Patch me up, I'm not leaving. Did what she could with field medicine. Grant was back on her feet within the hour, pale but functional. She refused to slow down. 4 hours until the transports arrive, she told Al. We need to fall back to the spaceport, make our final stand there. Agreed, but someone must hold the rear guard, buy time for the retreat. I'll ask for volunteers. No need. Al straightened his posture. I will command the rear guard. Grant studied him. There was understanding in her eyes. The rear guard was a death sentence. Everyone knew it. You don't have to do this, Commander. You could withdraw with your forces. No one would question it. I would question it. I would know for the rest of my life that I abandoned soldiers who trusted me. He paused. Your philosophy is contagious, Captain. I seem to have caught it. Then I'm honored to have infected you. Al put out the call for rearguard volunteers. He expected a handful of responses. He received hundreds. Human and soldiers, wounded and healthy, officers and enlisted. They all wanted to stay. He selected 50. It was more than he needed, but he could not turn away soldiers who wanted to fight. Sergeant Cole was among them. He had left the medical station against orders, his wounds barely closed. He walked with difficulty, but his eyes were clear. You should be resting, Al told him. My people are still fighting, Cole replied. I can rest when we're done. They took positions along the main avenue leading to the spaceport. Behind them, the bulk of the defenders retreated with the remaining civilians. Ahead of them, the massed for the final push. Al gathered his mixed unit together, and human soldiers standing side by side, weapons ready, faces grim but determined. I owe you an apology, he said. When I arrived here, I believed humans were reckless and inefficient. I believed your military doctrine was flawed. I was wrong. The soldiers listened in silence. I have watched you fight and die for strangers. I have watched you hold positions that could not be held, rescue wounded that could not be saved, refuse retreats that any rational commander would order. And I have learned something that my people never taught me. He looked at each face in turn. Human, all of them soldiers, all of them family now. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something is more important than fear. You have shown me this. Today, I am proud to stand with you. Whatever happens, I want you to know that you have changed how I see the universe. Sergeant Cole smiled through his pain. Damn, Commander, that was almost poetic. Do not tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation. The charged. The next 2 hours were the longest of Al's life. They held the avenue with everything they had. Soldiers fell and were dragged to cover. Ammunition ran low and was shared among the survivors. The line bent but did not break. Cole went down during the final assault. A blade found his chest. Al dragged him to cover while other soldiers closed the gap. Tell the captain, Cole gasped. Tell her we held. Tell her yourself. You are going to survive this. Cole laughed, though it cost him. Bad liar, Commander, but I appreciate the effort. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, but it did not stop. Al looked up to see the evacuation transports descending through the clouds. Beautiful ships, gleaming in the sunlight. Hope made metal and fire. But they had breached the spaceport perimeter. They were inside the final line. Fall back, Al ordered. Get to the ships. They ran, carried their wounded, left no one behind. They were everywhere, but the defenders fought through them, step by bloody step. The transports were loading. Civilians first, then wounded, then soldiers. The ramp was so close, so close. Al looked back and saw human and soldiers holding the last line together, dying together. He kept running. The final hour arrived with fire and blood. Swarmed the spaceport from every direction, their numbers beyond counting. The defensive lines had collapsed. All that remained was a single perimeter around the landing pads, where the last evacuation transports waited. Al stood at the center of the line, shoulder to shoulder with Captain Grant. She was pale from blood loss, her wounded arm hanging useless at her side, but she refused to board the transports. Not until everyone else was safe. "Every remaining defender," she said through the communication channel, "form a single line. We hold until the last civilian is aboard." They came, humans and wounded and exhausted, all of them gathering for the final stand. There were perhaps 200 soldiers left, against thousands of. Lieutenant was among them, her medical kit abandoned, a rifle in her hands instead. "The wounded are loaded," she reported. "Medical ships are standing by in orbit." "In Cole?" Al asked. "Still alive, barely. They're working on him now." The line opened fire. Bodies fell on both sides. The noise was deafening, overwhelming. Al fired until his weapon overheated, switched to his sidearm, fired until it was empty, then picked up a rifle from a fallen soldier and kept shooting. Beside him, Grant fought with one arm, directing units with her voice while firing with her remaining hand. A broke through the line and came at her. Al intercepted it, driving his blade into its throat. "Thank you," Grant said. "You saved my soldiers yesterday. I owed you one." She smiled despite everything. "I think we're past keeping score." The transports lifted off behind them, one by one, carrying civilians to safety. Each departure meant fewer people to protect. Each departure was a victory. But the line was shrinking. Soldiers fell faster than the transports could launch. They kept coming, endless and relentless. "Commander's voice came through the communicator. He was somewhere on the left flank. "It has been an honor serving with you." "The honor is mine, old friend." Grant looked at Al as they pressed closer. "Do you finally understand why we never retreat?" "I think so. You do not retreat because retreat means leaving someone behind, and humans cannot do that." "We can," she said. "We just choose not to." The last civilian transport lifted off. Only military personnel remained on the ground, and still the defenders held. Then, impossibly, the sky lit up. Al looked up to see warships descending through the clouds. Human warships, their weapons blazing, cutting paths of destruction through the forces. The lead ship was marked with the name Valor. "This is Captain Lane of the Valor," a voice announced over all channels. "We heard you needed some help. Extraction shuttles are launching now. All ground forces prepare for immediate evacuation." The human fleet had arrived. They had pushed through enemy lines, risked their ships and crews, all to rescue soldiers who were supposed to be beyond saving. "How?" Al breathed. Grant laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Because that's what we do. We don't leave our people behind." The Valor and her sister ships laid down covering fire while extraction shuttles landed at the spaceport. They fell back under the overwhelming assault. For the first time in 18 hours, the defenders had room to breathe. "All units board the shuttles," Grant ordered. "Wounded first, then by squad. Move." They moved, quickly, efficiently, still fighting even as they retreated. The shuttles filled and launched, one after another. Al made sure every soldier boarded before him. Grant did the same for her humans. They were the last two on the ground. The final shuttle waited, its ramp still down, its engines screaming. "After you, Captain," Al said. "We go together, Commander." They ran, side by side. The ramp closed behind them just as reached the landing pad. The shuttle lifted off, leaving the enemy clawing at empty air. Al collapsed against the shuttle wall, exhausted beyond words. Grant sat beside him, equally spent. Around them, human and soldiers leaned on each other, too tired even to celebrate. They had survived. Against all odds, against all logic, they had survived. 2 weeks later, Al stood before the High Command to deliver his report. The council chamber was vast and ancient, filled with admirals and generals who had commanded fleets and armies across dozens of worlds. "Commander Al," the High Admiral said, "you disobeyed direct orders. You refused authorized withdrawal. You risked lives to support a human operation." "I did," Al replied. "Explain." He had thought about this moment for days, how to make them understand what he had learned, how to translate human courage into words that officers would accept. "Humans measure victory differently than we do," he said. "We count territory held and enemies killed. They count lives saved. We believe efficiency is strength. They believe loyalty is strength. We retreat to preserve forces for future battles. They stand and fight because they refuse to abandon each other." The council was silent. I watched humans die for soldiers they had never met. I watched them hold positions that could not be held, simply because civilians were still evacuating. I watched them refuse every logical opportunity to retreat because retreat meant leaving someone behind. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Their doctrine is inefficient. More soldiers die because of it, but their soldiers fight harder because of it too. They fight without fear of abandonment. They fight knowing that if they fall, their brothers and sisters will come for them. This is a strength we do not possess." "Your recommendation?" the High Admiral asked. "Immediate and permanent alliance with humanity. They are the most dangerous and valuable allies in the galaxy, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their hearts." The council debated for 3 days. In the end, they approved the alliance. Al returned to his quarters and found a message waiting from Captain Grant. She and Sergeant Cole had both recovered. The civilian evacuation had been successful. All 40,000 had reached safety. At the end of the message, she had written, "You asked me once why we never retreat. Now you know. It was an honor fighting beside you, Commander. Until next time." Al looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were still fighting, still refusing to retreat, still protecting each other with a loyalty that logic and transcended efficiency. He finally understood why. Humans never retreat because somewhere behind them, someone is counting on them to stay, and they would rather die than break that trust. It was not efficient, it was not logical, but it was powerful beyond measure. And now it was part of him too.